This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, now the thing is that we have spoken about, or we have rather done something like this, right? So we had an Azure resource group inside which we went ahead and created an Azure web app, and we created a SQL database, right? An SQL database out here, or an SQL server and a database out here. We made sure that our SQL web app, sorry, our web app basically goes ahead and kind of communicates with, let's say, this particular database out here, right? Like we did this particular or rather we did this particular exercise where we created our web app, created a SQL database, established a connection string, and then deployed code on top of our web app. And whatever we were basically injecting into our SQL database using, let's say, the SQL Server Management Studio, we were able to get the same thing on the Azure web app also, right? This is something that we did. So the question here is, can I do the same thing with Azure DevOps as such? Because earlier when I did it, it was all a manual procedure where I went ahead and kind of created a web app. And we now know that you can also create a web app using ARM templates and using the Azure DevOps portal. Then can you create a SQL server in the same way? Can you attach both SQL server and the web app? And like the way I do code deployment, can you also run scripts, or can you also basically run SQL scripts on, let's say, this particular SQL server that you're about to create? And can you leverage the entire functionality? The answer is definitely yes. You will be able to do it without even having to touch the Azure portal. You will be able to do it. You will be able to do the everything without even having to touch the Azure portal. But for which I need a template which has, let's say, a web app and a SQL server out here, right? So what I'm gonna do is, like, I'll just create a simple template out here. Sorry. I'll create a very simple template from Visual Studio, and I don't want to make a lot of modifications. Rather, I'll just make some modifications and start using my template out here. So I'll say create a new project, and then I would say typically Azure Resource Group, because I want to create an ARM template, which basically gives me a web app and a SQL server. So let me go ahead and take this out, and let's say Azure Resource Group. Let's say next, and I'll say this is a web application SQL server or SQL or something like this, and I'll say create. So this will basically now tell me, what is the template that you want to choose. So I'll say okay, fine. I'll select a web app plus SQL, and I'll say okay. And now it will go ahead and try to create or try to provision me an ARM template which has all these capabilities, right? So this is the ARM template that I have. So let me go into the website SQL database.json, and let us do some basic editing out here to see what really happens out here, right? So I have a couple of parameters like hosting plan name, which is a string, SKU name again, which is, let's say, F1, which is good enough for me, SKU capacity, which is, let's say, something like one, administrator login, which is just a string out here, administrator password, which is a secure string, database name, which I haven't declared at all, and then I have something called collation, which is like string out here, and then the database size, which is like just a basic size, and then we have somewhere around, like, some bytes of, basically information that is like given out here, and requested objects queue is like basic. So I'm just saying this is the SKU of my basic, I mean, this is the SKU capacity of my database and etc., and these are the parameters which are controlling it. Second thing, you have variables which is called website name, but I don't want my website name to be a variable, because it's like way too, basically it creates its own kind of name out here. So I don't have any control on what name it's kind of getting created out here. So I don't want my website name to go as a variable. Rather, I want it to be, let's say, something like a parameter. So after this parameter is done, I'll just give a comma out here, didn't type this. Okay, I'll just give a comma out here, and I'll just say website name, and I'll say this something like this, and I'll say type is a string. That's it. I don't even want to give a default value to it. I don't even want to give a default value to it. Finally, I'll say even my SQL Server name is not a variable, but it's a parameter that I want to declare out here. And I would say the SQL Server name is something like SQL Server name. And I'll just declare the type as string, which is the mandatory parameter out. I mean, which is, let's say, one of the mandatory things that I need to declare to just let the template know what exactly that I'm doing out here. Say format. Great. Now I just declare these two, right? So I don't need these to be in the variable. So I'll just delete them out. And in the resources section, I have a couple of resources that are getting created. SQL Server hosting plan. So inside the SQL Server, you also have a databases and firewall to the database. Inside the web app, you have something like connection strings, and these two, auto scale and let's say application inside component is something that I don't want. So I'll just delete. So now I'll just fix my ARM template because there are a couple of errors out here. If you see, there are all a lot of reds out here, for which I need to say this is not variable SQL Server name, but this is parameters SQL Server name. And then I have the same thing out here, but this is again not variables, this is parameters. So all I'm doing right now is fixing my template, making sure that my template kind of goes properly. Parameters. And if I come down, hosting plan is good, but here it is again variables website name, so I'll say it is parameters website name. So I'm just doing the bare minimal editing of this so that I kind of have this one out. So I'll say parameters website name, and finally out here also I'll say parameters website name. And now finally, if you see, you have the database that is getting created out here, and you have a SQL server which is getting created out here. And for that SQL server, you are giving an administrator login, administrator password, and all these things out. And then finally, you have a website with a hosting plan and a connection string, so that your website, right, it can get connected to the SQL server that is getting connected. So it's saying the default connection is something like this, and it's saying okay fine, this is how the default connection looks like. This is how, let's say, the administrator password and all that stuff really looks like and all. So I say okay fine, this is good enough, but my string needs to go in a different way. So I'll also need to fix this out because it is referencing a lot of variables and etc. So I'll say this is parameters SQL server name, fully qualified domain, it says parameters this one. Let's see where all it's like kind of referring this out to. So parameters again. So this is like kind of fixed out. So I am like good with this. So this is like there are no errors with this particular template. As far as what I can see, there is no error, but I have like parameterized everything out. So if I do, let's say, a deployment out here, if I say new, and if I, let's say, choose my account, which is like right now active, and if I kind of edit the parameters, there are all these parameters which are going as blank. There are all these parameters which is going as blank, and also my connection string, right? This is not properly constructed, meaning my connection string is something like this, which is okay for a starter, which is let's say pretty much okay for me as at this point, but I'll kind of modify it later if I need to. So I will also see that. So right now I have like kind of constructed the entire template, and my parameter file doesn't have anything. Like my parameter file is literally going as a blank. It doesn't really have anything. It's like all the null values basically inside it. So this is what I'm constructing, or this is how I'm constructing my template. So what I'm gonna do is, like, I'll say firstly I'll upload all my templates into the repository. So this is basically my template. So these two is something that I need. All these things, right? I don't need it. I just need the main template and the parameter templates out here. These are the only two things that I would need. So what I'll do is like I'll just go to an Azure DevOps repository and let me create a new repository out here. Let me say web application SQL and I'll say create. So I've created a main repository out here. I'm not putting any branching policy and etc. because we know how branching policies and all work. Or you can also use the existing repository out here. Like you have a test full framework, right? This is something that we've been using. You can also use this existing repository and you can use the develop branch of this particular repository in order to make your all operations kind of work. We have the also the ARM templates and all out here. So we can also use this particular repository out here. But just before you commit anything to it, I would like to, let's say, just do a very small change out here, that I have a build pipeline associated with this, right? I'll just disable the CI trigger on that particular build pipeline because anything that I do a commit here will directly trigger a CI. So I'll just say I'll just disable the continuous integration out here so that I don't get hampered in any ways. So I'll just say disable CI. I'll say save, which is great, which is okay. And now what I'll do is like I'll just open my Visual Studio Code and I think I already have this repository cloned on my local machine. Let's say new repo. I think yesterday that is what we did, testful framework. And yes, this is something that I do have already. This is the folder that I want to open out. So I'll just say new open folder. And this is the new repository folder that I want to open. This is the folder that I want to actually open. And what I want to do right now is that I firstly want to go ahead and let's say add my ARM templates into this particular folder out here. So I'll just say, okay, fine. Like there is a folder for ARM templates, and in the ARM templates, you have something like web application template.json. So inside this, I want to also go ahead and create basically a folder called web application SQL and etc. and inject all my templates that I've copied out here. Like this, all these templates, I just want to inject it out. So I'll just say copy these two templates. I'll say, okay, fine, new folder. I'll say ARM templates web app SQL. And I'll basically, I have like, let's say just put this files into it. And as when I put that file, it like definitely show me changes out here. It's saying fine, you have all these changes out here and these changes are ready to be committed. Now even before I commit this out, I also want the code. I had, let's say, like the last time when we kind of talked about this, right? We had a code also, right? We said, okay, fine, we have a .NET full frame, I mean a .NET core code out here which can go ahead and let's say talk to your database, because that's basically the working engine that I have, right? So I'll just look at my code, how it looks like. So this is how my code looks like. This is the code basically that I'm working with today. And if I say open with Visual Studio selector or Visual Studio 2019, I have a solution file and I have all these code basically got developed in, let's say, a .NET core. So all this code is actually kind of developed in a .NET core language. So let me open this up. And this is how the code looks like. And the code, right? If I look into the code and if I look into, let's say, the controller in which the code is actually developed, it is looking for a DB connection string. Now this is the value of the connection string, what the code is actually looking for. So I'll kind of edit that in my template also, because this is what the value it kind of needs. And it's an .NET core application. So this is the entire code what I kind of get out here. So what I'll do is I'll say, okay, fine. Since this is the entire code, and even inside the code, right, I have the SQL commands out here. Like I have a couple of SQL commands in order to go ahead and create the tables and in order to go ahead and create various stuff out there. Okay, just a strange fine. So I have SQL commands basically which can go ahead and create me the tables and all that stuff. But I'm not running it locally. I'm not doing it at all. I'm not touching the portal at all, right? So what I'll do is like I'll say this is the web application code that I have. So I'll just copy even this particular folder and I'll basically go into that particular new repository in this particular folder out here and I'll also paste this out. So I am even pasting my code as well. I also want to do along with my ARM templates. I also want to go ahead and push my code also in basically at one go. Great. So I also have my code out here, and as in when I push it, it now basically takes some time and it tells you know what. Okay, fine. There are 714 changes out here. There are so many things that you kind of committed. Do you want to commit all? I mean, do you want to stage all these changes? Yes, I do want to stage all these changes out. And it's gonna. I mean, since there are so many things out here, right? It will take some time. And the branch that I'm working on is C feature ARM, which is like kind of deleted. So I'll create a new branch and kind of check out on that particular branch out there. Okay. So all these are like stage changes now. Let's see. Yeah, all these are stage changes. And I'll say committing in ARM templates and the code and say enter. So I'll say basically commit. So I'm committing my changes to the local machine right now. Now what I'm going to do is like I'll basically create a new branch. Say create a branch. I'll say this is feature code ARM. I'll say enter. And this now basically has created a branch. Now I'll basically push this branch to the cloud. It says yes, I'll say okay. And now what it's doing, it's like it's trying to push everything from my local machine to the cloud. And firstly going ahead and creating a branch in the remote git repository. And then it'll go ahead and basically push all the code into that particular repository out there. So let's wait for this changes to kind of go ahead and commit. So until then guys, any questions till now, anything that I can take?
I didn't understand
Mhm.
web application you pulled, right? Something in the folder.
This one, this one,
Yeah.
like
So
the web
where it
application.
come from? Web app.
Sorry, I didn't
Where
get you.
this code came? Where this code came from? Web app solution.sl.
So I just downloaded this code. So I'll like forward this code out to you. So I have not written this code. I have just downloaded this code out here. So I'll
Okay.
just forward this code out to you. I'm just using this code. That's it.
Okay.
So I'll just
For
basically
what
give the code.
purpose we are
Hmm?
using this? For what purpose we are using this? We already created some database, right, in the web
But the
application
database
library.
is not there now, right? Like I've like deleted everything out. Like my portal right now doesn't have anything. Like it's literally blank now. So I
Okay.
want to create a new web application, a new database, and then join everything out and then deploy the code. But I don't want to do it from my local. What we did earlier was we created a resource group, create a web app, then basically give something known as a connection string to the web app and all that stuff, right?
Yes.
Now this is something that I don't want to do any going forward. This is something that
Okay.
I want my Azure DevOps to do.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So now I have my code as well. So let's say I have this feature branch, which is feature code, something ARM template and etc. And inside this, one of the main things that I actually want to change before I go ahead and merge is this particular parameter called connection string. And it's going as something known as a default connection. So it's telling, okay, fine, this is the default connection and the value is something like this and all. I have not declared the value also. But if you look at the code, right, it's expecting this particular value to be the connection string. So I'll just copy that particular value and I'll say, okay, fine, the DB connection string, and I'll just commit this out. So I'm just adding that particular commit. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a pull request into, let's say, the develop branch. So now I'm committing, let's say, about 714 files, which is all these things, the code, the ARM template, everything that I'm kind of committing out. And I'll say, okay, fine. Committing code and ARM. Code and ARM. Fat fingers, okay, fine. Let's copy this out, put it in the description. I'll just say create. So I'm doing a PR, approving it out myself, and completing it out. And I'll just delete that branch after I complete this out. And this is done. So now your develop branch has, let's say, a lot of things out here. Mainly, it has a web application with all the solution file, and it also has, let's say, some commands out here that you can go ahead and use at a later point in time. And it has a solution file, which is like main important thing, and it has, let's say, like multiple files inside it. And main thing what as a DevOps engineer I'm interested into is the ARM templates. Like you have different ARM templates out here that will go ahead and create both the web application, the SQL database, and kind of join both of them using a connection string. This is what I do have right now. Now what I'm going to do is like I'll go ahead to my pipelines, and in order to basically use this out, in order to firstly build it out, I'll say, let me open this in a separate tab. In order to build it out, I will basically go ahead and create a pipeline out here. So I'll say new pipeline, I'll say classic editor for now. And I'll say, okay, fine, this is the test repository and etc. I mean, this is the repository and the develop branch of this repository, and I'll say continue. And I know that this is a .NET Core. So I'll basically apply something known as a .NET Core code out here. That says, okay, fine, I'll just edit and I'll say this is a web application SQL Server, something like this. And it's asking me agent specification. So for now, I'll go ahead and take a Windows 2017 and hosted on a Windows 2019 machine. And here I know that I want to build a solution file of this particular thing. I want to build this particular solution file out. So I'll just copy this path and I'll say, okay, fine, this is the path that I want you to build. Test cases, I don't need it right now because probably there are no test cases in that. So I'll just leave the test cases for now, or you can also enable this out. There is no harm in doing that. And if you look at this, it's just a repository, restoration, build, test, and publish. A very classic .NET Core. I'm not doing anything different out here. And I would also want to go ahead and copy my ARM templates, right? That is something that I want to. So I'll do a copy. I'll say copy files. And now I'll say, okay, fine, copy files to what? To the build.artifact staging directory, which is, let's say, the source directory that I want, which is, let's say, the drop location that I want. I'll say build something like this. And for source folder, like I'll say this is my source folder. I'll say okay. I'll say everything that starts with JSON .json is something that you want to copy, meaning wildcard, whatever is there before .json, I don't mind. But if it's a JSON, I want you to go ahead and, let's say, give this files to me. And I say, okay, fine, this is the target folder. And I can also say give a forward slash and say ARM templates, something like this, but not necessary. You can say fine, I want to basically publish all the artifacts into this particular location, which is like good enough for me. Now I'll say save this out and run this out. So what I'm doing is, apart from building my code, which I would definitely need to basically go ahead and build my code, I am also going ahead and copying my templates also. Like this is this is an error basically that I'm kind of getting out these days. Apart from building my code, I'm also going ahead and, let's say, apart from building my code, I'm also going ahead and, let's say, copying my ARM templates into the drop location so that I can use them in the release pipeline. So it says, okay, fine, this is code commit and all. Now it's doing a git checkout and all, and it will complete within a minute. So it's trying to restore the dependencies, and it'll try to build the files and all that stuff. And finally, it will do a test, and then it will copy all the folders. It will copy basically all the ARM templates inside that particular folder. So that's what I'm doing right now. So let's wait for a minute. So what I did right now is that this code is my main code out here. Okay, this is a link that I'll go ahead and share with you all. As of now, I haven't uploaded it into the Git repository because it's too large and it's not letting me kind of upload it. But I'll share a link to one of you all so that you can pass it on to the class from where you can download this out. I'll do that right after the class. And if you all want, now this is an optional one. If you all want, I'll go ahead and also give the ARM template. But this is optional, guys. What I expect is you to build the ARM template. If you don't, please use it for as a reference. So I'll also go ahead and upload this into, let's say, a Git repository and give it to you all, and you all can use this out for your future references out here. And it says, okay, fine, it's kind of failed out here. Let's see. Okay, my publish step failed. Let's see what happened. It says, okay, fine. Okay, the same error what we got the other day. So let me do a quick edit of this out here and say, just to make sure that I build this out. I'll just take this out and say, okay, fine, this is what I need. And I'll just do a fresh push out here. And I'll just try to build this out so that I have a clean build that I can basically go ahead and use it in my release pipeline. Now, just when this is kind of getting built, how should my release pipeline really look like, or what should my release pipeline really have, is a couple of things out here. First of very which is the creation of the infrastructure, right? This is something that we were speaking about. Creation of the infra. The first of very much thing is like creation of the infra. Here, I'd like to create the SQL servers plus the web app. I'd like to create both of them. Secondly, I want to make sure that I create tables on my SQL server, tables and data on my SQL server, that is, or my SQL database that I've created. Finally, I want to go ahead and deploy the code on top of my web application. These are the steps basically that I want to achieve after the build pipeline is done. So I'll wait for the build pipeline to be done, and I'll go ahead and kind of do all these things out. And what I'd like to do here is that here, when I'm building, let's say, the SQL server and the web app, I have not passed anything in the parameter, right? This is something that you have seen. There is nothing in the parameters, like there's nothing in the file. There is no parameter in the file at all. I've just passed it, or I have made sure to what do you say, parameterize everything out without even having to, let's say, hard coding anything. So my intention is I don't want to hard code it. I want to make sure that my Azure DevOps pipelines take care of all these things out. And one more quick tip, basically, when you're trying to validate an ARM template, right? And especially when you're writing in something like a Visual Studio, it becomes a bit tough to understand where the errors are. Like if you're missing on a syntax or something. What I would do, I would basically prefer writing it in, let's say, Visual Studio Code, which is like, let's say, the editor that I use a lot because it is easy to identify the errors. But just in case if you're writing it in Visual Studio and if you want to validate this out, just go to this particular website called JSON Lint. It's called JSON Online Validator format and all that stuff. And just place this out and say validate. And you'll get something like valid JSON. So this will basically say it will lint all your files. And just in case if you miss a comma or something like that, right? Something you missed out here, okay? See, it identifies and tells you that, at line number 135, you are kind of missing a comma out here. This is how it will identify it. It'll say, okay, fine, you're missing a comma out here and something like this. So it'll identify to the point and tell you that where your JSON, or if your JSON is having an error or not. This is how it will kind of tell you what is the issue with your JSON, etc. This is especially for someone who's writing, let's say, in a Visual Studio 2019 server. But if you're writing in a Visual Studio code, then I don't think the JSON lint is like really valid out here, because that itself takes care of a lot of things. That itself, let's say, takes care of all the things to build and all that stuff. And this is, I don't know why, but this is taking much more time than expected. Let's wait for this to kind of complete. And after it gets completed, right now, if you look at the earlier run, I'm not sure if I can show you the earlier run. Let's see. This is how the code gets published. You have, okay, this is also kind of doing the earlier project also, so this is not valid, and this did not also copy my files. So I need to basically wait for other couple of minutes and try to build this out. So let's wait and let's try to build this out. Guys, any questions while this is getting built out? Anything basically that I can take? Anything? Anything, guys? Anything until this point? Are you able to follow, guys, what I'm trying to do out here, or is there any disconnect with this?
So there are two codes, right? One is for database and another is for web app creation, right now?
There is the ARM template is only one. Like only have one ARM template, which is like used for if you look at my ARM template out here, it's creating the server, the database, the app service plan, and the website, and also attaching all of them. So I am not doing anything different out here. Like this is something that we did earlier also, where we basically talked about a concept called an Azure Key Vault, right? So
Yes.
I'm just using the same template. I'm just reusing the same template, but I'm parameterizing everything, parameterizing the website name, everything. I'm just parameterizing it out, and I am just like, let's say, telling that, okay, fine, create a database, create a website. So this is what I'm doing. So I have just one ARM template, okay, just creating both of them, and then
Okay.
I have a SQL script which will go ahead and create the tables inside the SQL server that I've created. Meaning when I did manually, what I did, Akila, is that I went ahead, I created a web application, created a SQL server, connected both of them, and then took the SQL server from my local SSMS and kind of let's say created the tables and all the data and then injected everything, right? So
Yes.
I am not touching it in my local machine at all. I want my Azure DevOps to take care of all these things right now. So this is what we are going to do right now, for which I had a code which will basically give me the fuel for my infrastructure. I just made sure that I build my code and call my ARM templates. Now if you look at the drop location out here, I have both ARM templates and basically the code, which is like .zip, and I have both the ARM templates out here. Okay.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do right now is that I'm going to go ahead and create a release pipeline, which will help me in doing this. So I'll say new release pipeline. I'll say let's close this out, and I'll say this is SQL Server Web Application Deployment, something like this. And I'll say fine, add a stage, and I'll just start with an empty job in the stage, and I'll say the stage name is development. Okay. And I'll say okay, fine, this is the development stage, and agent job I'll just give it as uh, creation and release of the code, creation and code release. And what I'd like to do right now is that I'd like to now go ahead and add all these things that I want to. So first thing I want to go ahead and create, right? So which task can I add, guys, here? Like if I go here, which task do I need to add first? Anyone? Anyone, guys? Which task do I need to add now?
Sonar Cloud.
Why would we add a Sonar Cloud out here? This is a release pipeline, right? And I want to create my infrastructure. So which task would I add here?
Task groups.
Task group, yes, but that was a specific task group out there. I want to do an ARM template deployment, right? So I'll add the ARM template deployment step. This is the first thing that I would add, because what I want to do is I want to create the infrastructure using the ARM templates that I have. So I'll basically add this out. So I'll say ARM template deployment, and I'll say, or I'll just take this out and I'll say create web app and SQL. And I'll say, okay, fine. I want to create the web app and SQL. I'll take the Azure service connection that I do have. I'll take the subscription ID that I do have. And I'll say this is what dollar resource group name. And I'll say location is something like East US2. So I'll just select the location like East US2. And now I'll call my templates. There are two things here, templates and template parameters, right? So I'll just say, I'll click on this. Okay, there's no artifact link. So okay, fine. I'll just go ahead and add the artifact out here. I'll say, take a build pipeline. And that build pipeline would be the one that we just created, which is, let's say, where is that? Web application, SQL Server, and all these things out. This is something that we just created, right? So I'll just add the artifact. Now I'll come back. And here I'll just select this out from the drop. And I'll take the main template, which is website SQL database.json. I'll take the template parameters. Which is this particular parameter file. And now I want to override all my template parameters. This hosting plan name is null. So I'll say hosting plan name is dollar app service plan. SKU capacity is always okay. Administrator login, I'll say dollar administrator login. So whatever is the value, I'm just giving it like, let's say, a parameter out here. Password, again, let's say something like a password. So dollar something like this, something that I passed like this. Database name, dollar database name. Collation is okay, addition is okay. Website name, I haven't passed anything, so I'll say dollar website name. SQL server name, again, I haven't passed anything out, so I'll say dollar SQL server name. So I am parameterizing everything. I am not even declaring anything. I'm not even hard coding anything out here. I'll say okay. Now the first thing that I need to understand out here is that I have a couple of parameters like all these things. So I'll just write down all my parameters out here. So I need an app service plan. I need an administrator login in order to basically log into the SQL server. I need the administrator login password. I'll need to basically have a name for the database name. I will need to have a website name. And I'll need to have, let's say, a SQL server name. And how do I want to do again? For plan, I want to do, for development, I want to do dev plan 01. For administrator login, it's okay for me to go ahead and create, let's say, something like test user. Administrator password, something like Microsoft-001. Database name, I'm okay to go ahead and create something like a test DB. Website name again should be very specific. So I'll say it is dev web application to ABC000. SQL server name will be the same like website name, but it will just be dev SQL server to ABC 0, 0, 0. This is how I want to go ahead and create. One thing that is changing is, let's say, the environment prefix, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll say, okay, I'll go into my variables. I'll create a variable called env prefix, which is dev for development. And now I will go ahead and create all these parameters. First thing, app service plan. So I'll say app service plan is nothing but dollar environment prefix. Whatever is the environment prefix, go ahead and create one with something like plan 01. Administrator login, and see I'm scoping the app service plan to the release, because my all my stages in my release will use the same plan, but the environment prefix is going to change. For QA, if I add something, I'll just say it's a QA stage, right? So even all my all my plans and all are kind of dynamic, but I'm just adding one parameter for them. Administrator login, I'll basically keep it as something like test user. Administrator password should be a password, guys. Okay, this should not be an open text. This should not be a plain text. It should rather be a password. So I'll say it is Microsoft -001 and lock it out. It's a password, telling that this is a password out here. Database name is still okay. I'll just go ahead and say it is testdb. And website name again now is a bit different. So I'll say website name is something like environment prefix and the rest of the thing. My website name. SQL Server name is again environment prefix. Is again, let's say, environment prefix out here. Whatever is the parameter out here, take this out and say environment prefix. And whatever is the name that is like getting appended, paste it out here. Everything now is scoped to the release apart from this. Now I'll tell you what is the advantage of it. And my variables are done. I've like declared all my variables, right? But this is just the creation of ARM template. This is just the creation of the infrastructure. Now what I want, after the creation of infrastructure, even before I deploy the code, I want to create tables on my SQL Server, right? But I don't have my SQL Server yet. I have not created anything as such. I have not created anything as such. And also I have missed something which is called a resource group. So I'll just say resource group name is also scoped to the release. And I'll use something known as an environment prefix out here. I'll say -rg. So dev -rg will become dev rg, dev -rg, something like this. So what I'm trying to say is that here I have not created my SQL Server yet. So how am I going to do a deployment on my SQL Server? Or meaning, how am I going to create tables and do all that stuff, right? For that, what I'm going to do is like I'll say add, I'll say database, and I'm creating an Azure SQL database. I'll say add an Azure SQL database deployment, and I will say okay, fine. It's DevOps deployment, SQL Server authentication, and now it's asking what is the Azure SQL Server. If you click here, it says okay, fine. You'll have to declare it something like this. If Fabricam is the name of your SQL Server, then it's going to be fabricam.databases.windows.net. But my SQL Server name is what? My SQL Server name is something like this, right? So I'll copy this variable and I'll say it is dollar SQL Server dot databases dot windows.net. Dot databases dot windows.net is my SQL Server name. SQL database name again is a variable, so it is like database name. So I'll just put it in something known as a database name out here.
So in this task, we are only creating the database, not the SQL Server, because we are creating SQL Server on the ARM template.
ARM template. In the ARM template, you're also creating the SQL database also. In this task, what I'm going to do, yes, you are creating the database also. This is the SQL Server, which is a parent, under which you are creating the database also. Also going ahead and creating the database.
So now in second task, we are creating tables in the database.
We are injecting the tables into the database.
Okay.
Now you're creating a plain database, right? So what I'm doing in the second task is I'm injecting all the tables inside it. Now, how am I injecting is like I'm giving the database name, the server name, the login and the password, so that it can establish a connection. So login and password will again come from here, right? So what I'm going to do here is this. I'll say I'll give the login and I'll also give the password, administrator login password. And now I'll say it is not a SQL DACPAC file. It is an inline SQL script. This is now asking me where your SQL script really is. I have SQL commands. I'll just copy all these commands out here. I'm not copying the drop table command. Drop table is going to kind of drop all my tables out here, and I'm just giving my commands out here. Does this answer your question, Chandra? Now, whatever SQL server that I'm creating, I'm injecting the tables and injecting the data into that particular SQL server.
Yes, got it.
Okay. Finally, I want to also deploy my code, right? So I'll say Azure Web App Deploy or App Service Deploy. I'll add my code out here. I'll say this is subscription, is DevOps deployment. App service name, I do not have an app service name as such. I literally do not have anything as such created. So I'll say app service name is something like this. I know for a reason or know for a fact that it's website name. So I'll say, okay, fine. Just go ahead and create something known as a website name out here. And I'll just select the .zip file that I have. These two are ARM templates. This is the zip file basically that I have, and I'll say okay. Now I'll just go ahead and save this out. And now I'll go ahead and create a release. I'll say create. And now this is going to create a release, and this is going to attempt doing all these steps out here. What's that? It's going to create the infra to start with. So whatever infra I'm asking it to create, I'm going ahead and creating the infra. And in the infra, it's creating a SQL server, a blank SQL database, and attaching it to the web application using connection strings. And it is going ahead and the next step creating something known as a tables using the inline SQL script that we have given it. So this script, I have injected it in something known as Azure SQL inline SQL task, where I went ahead and said, you know what, go ahead and create a SQL script out here for me. And finally, I'm not even giving the name of my web app. I'm saying whatever the web app is getting created here, please go ahead and deploy the code on top of it. So now it's telling, okay, fine, I'm trying to create this out. And it firstly tells you, okay, fine, I'll try to identify whether, let's say, there is, that particular resource group and etc. Now it says the resource group is, kind of created successfully. So if I go into my portal out here, it's created a resource group. Now I did not have anything to begin with, and now see it's creating the plan and all that stuff. So it's creating all the entities that I wanted to create. So sites and all that stuff, it's trying to create the SQL server and etc. And then it's trying to inject everything out there. So let's give it some time out here. So it's created an application, it's created a web app and all that stuff. Let me also check my template. I just have one quick hunch out here. Is that which is fine, which is fair enough, which is created something like this. Should have ideally created the SQL server first and then kind of created the web application, because I'm not really sure how it will kind of attach the connection string out here, because here is where it needs the connection string. And I'm just wondering how it did not get this out. Okay, fine. Let me try seeing this out. Now it's kind of creating the database and all that stuff. So it's just creating the entire package for me. It's creating the database. It's creating the the solution. It's doing everything out using this particular template. Using this particular template deployment, it's going ahead and creating all these things out. So I just wanted to create what app service plan created. This is the app service plan. Web application created. This is a web application. SQL server created. This is a SQL server. And you have a couple of things out here like connection strings and all. And finally, you're creating the database. So all these are like kind of created. And now finally, I am going ahead and saying do this deployment, and then go ahead, establish a connection with, let's say, the SQL server, and create the tables and all that stuff. So we'll just verify everything once it's created. Guys, any questions still here? Anything that I can take? Anything that I can take? Like, please don't hesitate to ask. That I'm in between the teaching. Please don't hesitate to ask. Please ask it, and I'll kind of explain this out.
So we are doing on development now. So
Yes, correct.
so we are parameterize everything in variables in here. So if we go for QA, then we need to specify all the variables again, right?
No, you just have to specify one variable called environment prefix. Everything else, right, Chandra, if you look at this, everything else is scoped to the release. Only the environment prefix is a variable that is scoped to the development. So what you're going to do out here is that you're going to just take another variable called environment prefix and scope it to QA. So what's going to happen for QA is, like, for QA, your environment prefix will become what? QA, right? Your resource group will turn into what? QA-RG. SQL server name will turn into what? QA SQL 2ABC something something something, right? That's how it's going to behave now. So you don't have to, exactly. That's the reason I went ahead and created something called environment prefix, and based out of the environment prefix, I've created all these variables. This is how I have done it. So that's the reason I've scoped it to the release to make things easy. Because if I did not do this right, if I basically hard coded everything, I would have created all these variables for even for QA environment. And now if you look at things, right, so it's basically went ahead, created the SQL server. It's done everything that it needs to do. It also went ahead and basically injected task or injected tables into that particular SQL server. And it went ahead and, let's say, also deployed the code on top of the application. And it, like, kind of did a finalized job out here. Now, if I go into this one, and if I, let's say, go into this particular resource group out here, and let me firstly look at the SQL server. Now, this was, let's say, just an empty SQL server into which I've injected something known as the tables and all. So firstly, what I'll do is I'll firstly whitelist my own self. This is saying the client IP. So I'll just say Kiran home, something like this. And I'll give my client IP address and I'll save it out. Now what I'll do is, like, I'll just go here. So okay, I'll just go here, take the name of the server and go to my SSMS. And I just want to see what the tables are out there. If you do not have an SSMS, it's still fine. You can go ahead and see this particular database out here. And you can basically log into that particular database using the query editor. Because this is a database that we kind of created, right? And say Microsoft-001. And if I kind of do this right, it has a table out here. So if I just write a very simple select statement on my particular database out here, just called db.products, and kind of run this query. Okay, on db, okay, fine. Let me do this. It says dbo.products. I did not do a select star from. Let me do this. Now I have a couple of data out here. See, I have, let's say, some kind of a data out here. I can do the same thing with using this particular SSMS out here. where I give test user and let's say Microsoft -001, and I'll be able to connect to that particular server, and I'll be able to do much more operations with this. And at the same time, it is also went ahead and kind of created the web application and also attached a connection string to it. So I'm just curious to see how the connection string really looks like, if it really has all the password and etc. So if I'll just go to the connection string out here, and if I do an advanced edit, it has all these things. It's called test database and all that stuff, and it basically has all that password and etc., which is good. So if I look at the connection string, I've also constructed this using a password like something like this called Microsoft -001 and all that stuff, which is SQL Server and all that stuff, which is like good enough. Now what I want to do is I'll go ahead and I'll browse this web application. And when the web application is loading, let me also see if I have the data in here using, let's say, the SSMS out here. So I'll just write a simple query on the SSMS. I'll just select star from dbo.products. I am only writing this query because I know that I have a table called products out here. So select star as in select everything from something called this particular table, which is dbo.product. And when I look at this website, it's kind of giving me a very blank website out here. But if I try to do /products, do you all now see this, guys? I have a list of products out here telling product A, product B, and product C, which has like different pricing out here. And this is a backend portal what an employee or basically the employee of an organization would use. And if let's say I were to add a new entry here and say product D and say the price is something like 90.07. Product D 90.07. It's also getting listed out here, see. And if I delete some entry out here, let's say if I delete the same entry out here, say yes, delete, and execute this query. So even without having coming to my database, I am just trying to interact with it from the API itself. Meaning, just imagine this to be a hospital entry, a registry or something like that, which will basically inject your data into the backend database. And you are a DevOps engineer who would want to create all these things out. This is what your implementation scheme would be. This is exactly how your implementation scheme would be. And if you would like to basically go ahead and create the same thing for, let's say, a same stage like QA or something like QA stage, right? What I'll do is like I'll just say, okay, fine. I can add all these things into a task group, or I can just clone this out and I can say this is a QA. And for QA, right, I just need another variable, and it's already created another variable for me for QA. I'll say this is QA. That's it. This is the only thing that I need to do. That's it. This is the only variable that I need to create. I don't even have to change any of my task because I have not hard coded anything as such. I have not even hard coded even a single piece of information out here. I have made sure to parameterize everything, and everything now is being controlled by my parameters. Everything out here is being controlled out here by my parameters out here, right? This is how I went sure I made sure that to go ahead and let's say add stuff out and etc. Now one quick thing out here is that I don't want to use my database login out here because it's a very sensitive information. Database logins and all these things are very, very sensitive information. I want to leverage the key vault. I want to leverage what? The Azure Key Vault functionality. Can I leverage it here? Of course you can do it. I don't even have to, let's say, inject, or I don't even have to, let's say, modify my template. I don't even have to do this. I can simply add a task here called Azure Key Vault, which will have the authority, or which will have the permission to go ahead and download all your secrets that are there in your Key Vault. How do I do it? dev.rg, create a new Key Vault out here called Key Vault. Create something out here. And I'll just say this dev key vault to abc000. I'll say east us2 in the same location. I'll just say retention period is something like 7 days. Access policy, I only have this particular access policy out here to access this key vault. I'll say okay, fine, public endpoints is good enough. I'll say review and create. So I'm just creating an Azure Key Vault, and what I will do right now is that this password, right, administrator login password, this will now be an entry inside my Key Vault. I don't want to basically put all my sensitive information on my parameters. This would just be an entry on my Key Vault. And how will I enter that out? Let's see that out. Let's check that out. Okay. Once the Key Vault is getting created, let's see that out, and let's see how you can use your Azure Key Vault in your Azure pipelines. So I'll say okay, fine, go to the resource. I'll say secrets. I'll say add a new secret out here. I'll say name of the secret is something like admin login password. And I'll say secret is something like Microsoft -001. Right, this is the secret that I just entered. I'll say create this out. So I just created a secret. Now what I'd like to do is, like, if I go into my deployment out here, I'll delete the secret. Now I don't want to basically hard code my secret out there. I don't want to even put my secret out there. And now if I go into the task, I'll just go ahead. Okay, where did I add this? Okay, let me remove this out from here. Let me target the development stage initially. I'll say add. I'll say Azure Key Vault. And this will be my first task. I want to download all the secrets. I'll use the service connection that I have. Now this is important, guys. Please follow this out. I'm using the service principal that I'm basically I've created, the service principal that I've created. And I'll say okay, fine. This is the Key Vault, and secret filter. I'll say please make sure basically that what do you say? Please make sure that all these secrets, all the secrets that are there in the vault are available, and make sure that these secrets are available to the entire job. This is the job. Please make sure that these secrets are available to the entire job. Or I can also say, just give me this particular secret called administrator login password. If you just want that particular secret, that's just the secret that I want. I can also give a comma separated values of all the secret, or if I leave it as star, it means all. And I'll try now to basically execute this out. Now see, the administrator login password is not coming as a variable. It's coming as a password. It's coming as a key vault entry from, let's say, the Azure side of things, right? I'll say added a key vault task. KV task. I'll say okay, and I'll say create a release. I don't want to deploy on QA. It's only development that I want to deploy on. So this is release 2, and I'll say deploy this out. And now the release will try to go ahead and pull firstly the secret out. This is the first thing that this release should do, or will do rather, because that's the first task here, right? I want to make sure to leverage this particular vault out here, and I want to basically pull all that secrets out there. and now it's just thrown me an error telling that, you know what, okay, fine, I'm trying to download the secrets and all that stuff. So guys, from this error, can you all tell me what's gone wrong? Can anyone try to tell me what's gone wrong out here? Anyone, guys? Anyone? If you look at this error, it says the
In
user group
the
or application.
in the ARM template deployment,
Mm-hmm.
still we are mentioned as a variable, as a password.
Correct. As a parameter, yes. I have mentioned it as a parameter. For example, if you look at the administrator login password, I mentioned it as a parameter. But this is not failing at the Azure keyword deployment. This is even failing at, let's say, this particular task. It's even,
Okay.
it's not even going ahead and downloading the secret for me, which it should,
Okay.
right? Guys, anyone? This is the error.
We don't have the access.
Exactly. Now, I am able to add and I'm able to view the secrets because I have an access policy, right? The account that I'm using has an access policy for all the key permissions and secret permissions. But does the SPN that you are using for this particular deployment, which is DevOps deployment, does this have an access onto the secrets and etc.? No. Then how will this be able to download those particular secrets? Because keywords are very restrictive. Even though this particular service principal is an owner, until and unless this particular service principal does not have, let's say, an access policy on the vault, it will not give you the secrets. That's what it's trying to tell you out here. It's telling that, you know what, the user or the group or the application ID here, this is the user, the group or the application ID, something like this, does not have the secret get permission on the vault, something like this. And please make sure that you have these permissions and all that stuff. That is what it's trying to tell me. I for a fact know that this is going through this particular Azure subscription, meaning this is a service principal that I'm using. I'll say add a policy out here and I'll say key and secret management. This is the only thing that I need. I don't need a certificate and etc. And I'll say this particular DevOps deployment. Let me see where this particular or what is the name of the app registration that I've kind of created. This is the DevOps deployment for, let's say, the front end page that I use. But if I say manage service principal, this is DevOps Playground SPN. This is the application ID of the SPN. So this is something that I'd like to basically go ahead and, let's say, whitelist on my particular keyword. This one is the one that I want to basically go ahead and select and say add. And I'll also say ARM template deployment. This is good enough. And I'll say save. So I am making sure that the service principal using which we are going ahead and deploying the entire code or entire thing out here has the right permissions out there. And now I'll say go ahead and deploy this out. Now it should be able to go ahead and get all that secrets from the vault. So this is the logic, or these are the errors what we face in real time, guys. And the errors are like pretty straightforward. It will tell you, all you need to do is like you'll need to read what the error is kind of telling you out. You just need to read what the error is kind of telling you out there. For example, in this particular case, right, it's saying, okay, fine, it's saying that, you know what, this doesn't have a right, or this doesn't really have something like this. And it's like kind of basically taking out the application ID and everything. But I know for a fact that my application ID is like, or my deployment is running, let's say, using this particular service principle. And what this is going to do is that this is going to download the secret and make it available as a parameter for your entire template. It's going to make it available as a parameter for your entire deployment. This is how your deployment is going to get that secret and all that stuff. This is what it's going to happen, guys. Any questions till here, anything till here? Now I'll give you the entire code. I expect you to write the ARM template. I'll also give the ARM template. I won't deny giving the ARM template. I'll also give you the ARM template. But I just expect you to just have it as a reference and write the ARM template out here and just follow the procedure what we said, or just follow the procedure what we did. And this is exactly what you're going to do in the real-time environment. If you're, I mean, in the environment where I work, it's not just one, it's like 100 things that we basically go ahead and create out. But this is the base logic for everything, that how do you basically manage all these things out and stuff like that. Is this okay? Any further questions here? Anything?
Service connection and service principal are the same.
So service principal is what you call on the Azure side of things. So this is an SPN, and that particular service principal is something that you use as a service connection on the DevOps side of things. So they're one and the same, but what you call kind of matters a lot. It's kind of broken here. We'll see what exactly happened here. We'll see that. There's already a product here, because basically there's already a database here, so you cannot basically go ahead and create a new one out here. So you'll have to drop that database and then kind of run this out. So the second time when you do this, right, I also have a command to drop this out in the SQL file basically that I give you. Just do a drop table products. This is the command basically what you need to do, which will drop this particular table called products out here. So you just need to learn from the errors. It says what invalid object name and all that stuff. You just need to learn from the errors. It says there's already an object with the name called table. So you're again asking me to go ahead and create one. Here I'm asking you to go ahead and create one here, out here. Create something and something like this. So that's the reason it kind of failed out. So the next time when you deploy it, now here is a very good example. The next time when you deploy it, I don't want you to deploy, or you don't want you to create this one out, because this is already done, right? In the first attempt, this is already done. I only want you to, let's say, deploy, or I only want you to, let's say, go ahead and create the table and then go ahead and deploy the code onto the application. This is already done. This is already taken care of. Now there is a concept called editing your release. If I say edit, you have two things out here: edit the pipeline, which will edit the main pipeline; edit the release, which will only edit the definition out here, which is release 2. And I'll say edit only this particular task. I don't want this task. Save and redeploy. This is what a release definition, or this is what a release can kind of let you do. Like in the third attempt, what I'm trying to do is, like I'm saying, this is a release, guys. Okay, see, if I look at this particular release pipeline, there are two releases out here. Like one just created something out there, and release 2 basically just went ahead, and right now I just edited only this particular release out here. So this is a difference between editing the entire pipeline and editing the release as such. Okay, I have not edited the pipeline now. I am just editing the release. That's it. Meaning I'm just making changes only for this particular release. That's it. Guys, any questions still here? Anything that I can take?
Release nothing but how many times we run. Nothing.
I'm sorry,
Release time
I didn't
tells.
get you. Hmm?
Release is nothing but how many times we deployed. That number of times releases will be created.
So it depends again. See, if I go ahead and do an edit pipeline and create a new release, right? I'll say create a new release. It will create a new release called release 3. Now, if you look at the releases, right? 3 times that you have deployed, but inside a release, you can do a redeployment. Inside the same release, I did 3 deployments out here. This doesn't count. That doesn't basically take into factor your deployment, because there are two things that I did. I did a edit release, which will only edit this particular release out here, which will only edit this particular definition out here. There is also called edit pipeline. See, in the first time when we did, right, there was no development, there was no QA stage, right? So that's the reason this release is only giving you something known as a development stage. Now you cannot add a QA stage to it, because this release is locked. Now if you want to add a QA stage, you'll have to do an edit pipeline. which will add a QA stage as well. So release, yes, the number of times you deployed, but you cannot basically just just give a bare basic number on how many times you deployed, because inside one release you can go for multiple deployments, which are not factored when you look at this page, because this just factors the number of releases that you create. Does it answer your question, Chandra?
Yes, yes. So what is the use of by using the releases? We can directly go to the pipeline and we deploy it, right?
I mean, you mean what is the use of edit release?
Yes. So
So if this is failing, right, this is only one step that is failing. So I don't have to again go ahead, create a new pipeline and do all that deployments again from the scratch. Rather, I can use this particular release, just disable one particular task and go for the deployment rather. If I create a new release again, it'll basically give me the entire all the steps again, and I'll basically have to do the deployment from the scratch again, right?
yeah, QA and production,
Yeah,
everything.
exactly. So instead of that, can I just edit this particular definition and edit just this particular piece of thing? So edit just this particular release definition and just basically go ahead and do my deployments out there. Meaning, why do I want to create a new release every time? If I basically say that this is the same artifact that I'm using, the code has not changed, nothing has changed, but the only thing that basically happened is that in the first attempt, this is the issue. We fixed it and we did a redeployment, right? We redeployed the second release only. We did not create a third release then, right? In the second attempt, what happened is like that object was already there called products and it failed. So what I did is like, okay, fine, since it's failing, I'll just disable this particular task for this release. Meaning this task, if you disable it, it won't go ahead and disable this task on the pipeline. If you look at the pipeline, it won't be in a disabled state, it will be an enabled state. But if you look at that particular release, it will be in a disabled state. Look at this particular release, it will be in a disabled state out here.
Okay,
Does
got it.
this answer you?
Yeah.
And for QA also it was in visible state.
No, in QA it is not in disabled state, because that's a good question. I only edited it for this particular stage, right? In QA, it would be enabled. Meaning in QA that, I mean, this particular task would be enabled. In QA, we do not add the keyword, right? So this particular task would be enabled in QA, because I'm only editing one stage out here. I'm not editing the entire stages.
Okay, it even not created also. Okay.
Yes, it's not created also yet. Yes.
If it was created, then we can edit release, right? In the QA.
Yes, we can edit that particular release and kind of disable that particular task and then go with our deployment. Now, guys, what I want you all to read today is we were being using something known as pipeline variables, right? There is also a concept called variable groups or libraries in Azure DevOps. Just read about what variable groups are. We'll discuss about this tomorrow. I want you all to read about it. Just say click on variable groups and read about it and see how is it different. Now it says YAML, just say classic. It says how is it different from the pipeline variables, and we'll discuss about it further. Okay, so please read about this called variable groups or also called as libraries in Azure DevOps, and we'll talk about it when we kind of meet tomorrow. And what I'll do is like I am not in the group where you people are, so I'll just send across the link to download everything either to one of y'all. Like I have a couple of numbers with me. I'll just send across to one of y'all. Please post it in the group where all of y'all are there, so that everyone can go ahead and download the code and basically look at the templates. But please don't take my template. Please write your own templates. I am just giving you an idea on how to write a template, but please practice it, write this out and see how it will work out for you all. Okay. And very important thing, when you're writing your templates, right, make sure to put the connection string, I mean, to give the connection string a name called a DB connection string, because that is what the code is looking for. Put a name called as DB connection string out here. So, sorry, didn't copy that. put a name called a DB connection string out here, which will kind of help you all out to understand what this is. Okay. Any questions, guys? Now this is exactly how is it going to be in the real-time environment. Like these are the number of components. Like this is, let's say, just 1 or 2% what we do in the real-time environment. Like there will be like many more products, many more applications that you're going to create using the release pipeline. And this is something that you'll best definitely do, guys. This is something that you'll be definitely doing. Any questions before I close the session today? Anything? Okay, if there are no further questions, guys, I'll go ahead and close this session today, and we'll meet tomorrow and we'll discuss more on this concept. Okay. Thank you so much and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.